Bienvenidos. Did I say that right? Welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many faces on this Zoom meeting because it's so important for us to celebrate the rich diversity that we have, our staff and students. And I want to thank the committee for making this possible. There's so much thought that went into this. And I don't know if everybody can see, I mean, you can see the Zoom backgrounds, but you may not be able to see these t-shirts. I love these t-shirts that they put together. So really well done. We have an incredible 1 hour plan for you. Only here will you be able to visit both Mexico, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, all in 1 hour. So Alicia, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you so much, Pete. I appreciate it. And if you could bring up that first slide for us. I want to share with you some information and a little bit of history about Hispanic Heritage Month. So if you'd show the next slide, please. And so kick back, and as Pete mentioned, please feel free to put any questions in the chat for us. We were happy to address those later. And you also meet this hardworking committee that's brought today's event together. So on the next slide, I want to share with you the purpose, the origins, and some important numbers and why it's important to celebrate today. So the purpose of Hispanic Heritage Month is to celebrate the histories, cultures, and contributions of American citizens whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central, and South America. So the origins in 1968, this began as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Lyndon B. Johnson. And then it was expanded by President Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period. So it would start on September 15th and end on October 15th. And that time frame is significant because it includes the anniversaries of Independence Days for many of the Latin American countries. Now, the 2020 census shows that 60 million Hispanic Americans reside in the United States, and over 564,000 of them are Michigan residents. And that's 5.6% of the state's population, which is up 4.4% over the last decade. So why is it important to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? Well, we are the largest minority group in the nation, and we have significantly contributed to our government, culture, and economy over the generations. We've made many important strides and advances in the areas of law, religion, agriculture, art, music, education, technology, cuisine, theater, exploration, and more. And so it's important to recognize our contributions. And we really appreciate OCC's recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month and Christina for helping us bring this back. So now let's learn some terminology and the difference between Hispanic, Latino, and Latinx from Michelle and Renee. Next, please.
Gracias, Alicia. Hola. So we're going to go through a little bit of terminology. We're going to start with the terms, obviously, Hispanic and Latino, which actually were sparked in the United States or set into motion because of the United States Census. Historically, throughout Spain, the term Hispanic had been used for many, many purposes, but it was because of the 1970 United States Government Census Bureau that the term Hispanic was actually adopted. Before that, believe it or not, any person of Latin American descent was actually classified as white. It was because of frustrations by activists over the inability to show data that they needed for funding requests for jobs and various types of training programs. That's what led to the federal government to kind of imagine a broad Hispanic category with, or umbrella, with some additional subcategories where a person could actually identify not only as Hispanic, but also independently identify as Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, and so on. Around the 1990s, growing criticism even of that, of the use of the word Hispanic to describe those persons of Latin American origin is what sparked a new gravitation towards the term Latino. Because views of the word Hispanic as it related primarily in our minds to European Spain, not those of Latin American countries who had won their independence from Spain. And I guess one of the biggest things to keep in mind here is we're not talking so much about a race, but we're talking more of an ethnic identity that's both personal and societal in nature, with various cultural connotations, expressions, and characteristics that go with that. So we're talking about both terms at the level of an individual who's choosing an identity. In other words, a term that's comfortable to that person with all the complexities that go into that. Next slide, please. So the simplest, but also, I apologize, widest generalization of each term. Latino primarily is a geographical consideration and refers to people of geographic Latin American origin. Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Central America, and so on. Hispanic is primarily a language consideration, and this refers to the people of Spanish-speaking countries. And we can kind of look at this as more of a cultural term. But what's really important to know is that being one does not automatically mean being the other. For example, Brazil and Puerto Rico. Someone from the South American country of Brazil, where the majority language is not Spanish, but is Portuguese, are considered Latino or Latina or Latinx, but not Hispanic. Whereas Puerto Rico, US protectorate, which is part of the Caribbean, but where Spanish is the predominant language. So Puerto Ricans may therefore identify as both Latino and Hispanic. Michelle?
Hola. As Renee mentioned, today, Hispanic and Latino are the two dominant labels describing the US population of people who trace their roots to Latin America and Spain. However, there is now a new label, Latinx. The emergence of Latinx coincides with a global movement to introduce gender-neutral nouns and pronouns into languages whose grammar has traditionally used male or female constructions. In the Spanish language, the A at the end of a noun or pronoun identifies a word as female and the O as male. Some feel the term Latino only includes the men and excludes the women. However, in the Spanish language, when a group is mixed of male and female, the rule is to end the word in the letter O. Next slide. However, only 3% of Hispanics use the Latinx identifier. For most Latinos, Latinx doesn't work as an ethnic label, mainly because it's not even embraced by the community it describes. Many find Latinx confusing or culturally offensive. This is partially because of the term's linguistic nuances. Latinx is an anglicization of the language, an artificial label that defies the basic rules of Spanish pronunciation. To native Spanish speakers, Latinx feels foreign and imposed. Conversations about gender inclusivity in Latin America have already been happening since long before the introduction of Latinx. In Latin America, accepted gender-neutral terms include Latin and Latin American. They simply took the O and the A off of the end of the word. These alternatives prove that Latinx is simply not necessary. Meanwhile, others see Latinx as a gender and LGBTQ inclusive term, reflecting the broader movement within the US around gender identity. Next slide. There are a couple of subgroups that are more likely to use the Latinx term, and they are young Hispanics in the age range of 18 to 29 and Hispanics with college experience. Next slide. There are many perspectives on the Latinx term, from those who feel it's more inclusive to those who feel that the term is an Anglicism of the Spanish language and is not representative of the larger Latino community. And now back to Renee.
Thanks, Michelle. So the question is then, how do you know? Which one do you use? Hispanic, Latino, Latinx? As you probably already gathered, truth be told, it's complicated. Remember, we're talking about an ethnic identity that's chosen and comfortable to that particular person. So really, if you're with someone and you're not sure, ask. Just ask. It's okay, really. And with that, we're now going to turn it over to Alicia and look at some geography.
Thanks, Michelle and Renee. That was excellent. Very informative and right. The main point is just ask people. But as you referred to, there's that geographic consideration. And so right here, what we see are the 20 flags of the different Hispanic cultures and countries, territories. So if we can move to the next slide, in the Caribbean, we start off with Cuba. Then the next slide, the Dominican Republic. And then the next slide, Puerto Rico, right? And then we move over to Central America. Now, there are 6 countries in Central America that are considered Hispanic. And as Michelle had mentioned before, and Renee mentioned before, there's a distinction between which countries and territories are Latin and which are Hispanic. So 6 of these countries in Central America are considered Hispanic. Note that Belize is not among them because Spanish is not the primary language. Then in the next slide, very familiar place, Mexico. And then in the next slide, South America. Similar situation here. 9 of the South American countries are considered Hispanic. For example, Brazil is not because the primary language is Portuguese, not Spanish. So Brazil is Latin American, but not Hispanic. And then in the final slide, we have La Madre Patria, the mother country. And Spain is the common element among all the Hispanic countries and territories. Next, Pat Nowosinsky will take us on a beautiful trip to Costa Rica. Pat?
Gracias, Alicia. Buenas tardes. Next slide, please. Bienvenidos a mi país bonito, Costa Rica. We're going to start out with the geography. Costa Rica is in Central America, as we have just learned. Costa Rica has Panama to the south and Nicaragua to the north. The area of Costa Rica is 19,700 square miles. It's roughly the size of West Virginia. A lot of my former students ask, what can you compare it to? We can compare it to West Virginia. Costa Rica is divided into 7 provinces. We are bordered by the Pacific Ocean on the west and the Atlantic Sea on the east. You can travel to both coasts in one day. The capital of Costa Rica is San Jose, where I was born, nestled in the Central Valley, surrounded by mountain ranges. The current population is 5,048,000 people. Costa Rica has been referred to as the South Switzerland of Latin America. A Spanish word here for you to remember is país, which stands for country. Next slide, please. Let's talk about our national symbols. We have the flag, we have a coat of arms, a national flower, and our currency, which is extremely picturesque. The flag stands, the blue on the flag stands for the sky, for opportunities, for idealism, and for perseverance. The white symbolizes peace, wisdom, and happiness. The red stands for the bloodshed in our Civil War, for warmth and for generosity. The coat of arms depicts the isthmus between the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. It depicts our volcanoes, and the 7 stars stand for the 7 provinces. The national flower is the purple orchid. There are over 1,200 species of orchids in Costa Rica. Our currency is called the colon, which is named after Christopher Columbus. The exchange rate is 650 colones to $1. Spanish word here will be guaria morada, which is our flower. Next slide, please. Our origin. Costa Rica was discovered by Christopher Columbus and his fourth and final voyage in 1502. By coincidence, he anchored off Costa Rica's Caribbean coast to restock his supplies and to repair his ships. He was not aware that the coast offered everything: fresh water, delicious fruit, friendly natives, and the constant lure of gold, with the hope of vast treasures hidden deep in the rainforest. He named this newly discovered oasis Rich Coast, or Costa Rica in Spanish. Our word here is oro, which stands for gold. Next slide, please. Our education. Public elementary schools consist of 6 years of education, followed by 6 years of high school. The first 3 years of high school are dedicated to general education. There are very, very few electives for our high school students. 2 foreign languages in addition to English are required. So in high school, our students learn English, French, and possibly German. The remaining 3 years, students select specialized training. The school year is from February to December. Yes, our summer vacation begins in December. Our kids are out for summer school December, January, and February. Costa Rica boasts one of the highest literacy rates in Latin America. 97% of the population is literate. Student teachers are sent to rural areas to complete their student teaching. So everybody in the country has an opportunity to learn to read and write. The highly regarded University of Costa Rica is considered a first-rate educational institution in Latin America. Tuition generally runs at least 50% less than in-state tuition here in the US. Admission is extremely selective, based on extremely difficult oral and written entrance exams. Spanish words here are escuela and universidad. Next slide, please. Costa Rica is known as a very stable democracy among not so stable territory, which is where we are located. A tradition of peace. We are celebrating our bicentennial this year from 1821 to 2021. Costa Rica's democracy is one of the few left in Latin America. A president is elected every 4 years. An incumbent president cannot be reelected. There are 2 vice presidents and a cabinet. The president lives in his own house in a subdivision, and his children attend a local school. In 1987, one such president, Dr. Oscar Arias, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to bring peace to Central America. Costa Rica elected its first female president in 2010, Laura Chinchilla, a former elementary school classmate of my sister's. The Spanish word here is paz, which stands for peace, paz. Next slide, please. Law and order. There is no capital punishment in Costa Rica. The death penalty was abolished a century ago by constitutional mandate. Costa Rica has no army. It was abolished in 1948. Healthcare is free to all Costa Ricans. Health and education take up half of the national budget. Costa Rica has the lowest infant mortality rate in all of Central America and among the highest life expectancy rate in the world. We have just been named a blue zone country, of which there are only 5 places in the world. The remaining budget is reserved for conservation and the preservation of national parks. Next slide, please. Export. What do we export? Costa Rica exports bananas, coffee, pineapples, papayas, mangoes, and many more tropical fruit in addition to cotton. Tourism is today one of the most important sources of revenue for the economy. In addition, something very new to us is incoming. It's the export of medical equipment, which we are sending all over the world. Next. Ticos. Costa Ricans are called ticos. I am a tica. It is in reference to our common use of Spanish of the diminutive ending. Un momentico, por favor. One little moment, please. Ticos are mainly direct descendants of Spanish settlers mixed with native Indians. Notable ticos, in addition to a presidential Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Franklin Chan Diaz on the lower right was the first Costa Rican and Latin American NASA astronaut to travel on board the Space Shuttle Challenger. Also, actress and producer Giannina Facio, you may have recognized her from the movie Gladiator. Spanish word here, astronauta, astronauta. Next slide, please. Diversity and geography. Expect the unexpected. Encounters with the unexpected are the norm in my country. You can be sleeping to the background booms of an active volcano and wake up to a spectacular display of true nature as real fireworks spit out of a volcano. The next day, you can dive under a thermal spring waterfall heated by that volcano. And in the afternoon, you can swing on a cable atop a rainforest and come face to face with a howling monkey. Costa Rica's small size allows you to zigzag between beach, jungle, and mountaintops all in one day. You can travel from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast in a matter of 8 to 10 hours. Next, please. Fascinating facts. We have 130 species of freshwater fish. We have 160 species of amphibians, 208 species of mammals, 220 species of reptiles, 850 species of birds, more than all of North America. We have 1,000 species of butterflies and thousands of species of insects. Next, please. Fascinating nature facts. Canal networks throughout the jungles, cloud forest, coral reefs, deciduous forest, mangrove swamps, rainforest, tropical dry forest, and elevations from sea level to 12,529 feet. We have 61 volcanoes, 112 craters. 6 volcanoes are currently active. We have the only mountaintop where you can see both the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean from the top. Next, please. If you want beaches, we have 750 miles of coastline. We have white beaches. We have dark volcanic beaches. We have pink shell beaches on both coasts. Come to the beach. The word here in Spanish is playa, playa for beach. Next. Fresh fruit and vegetables and fresh fish are in abundance and a daily food staple. The daily black beans and rice called Gallo Pinto by Costa Ricans are always on the menu. The Costa Rican tamale is a meal in and of itself and a family tradition during the holidays, as many families gather together in an assembly line to make hundreds of tamales. In my house, 4 generations, from the youngest is 5 to the oldest 94, gather each year to honor this tradition. Spanish phrases. If you're sitting at a restaurant and you want to try gallo pinto, you would say, por favor, quiero arroz y frijoles, o tráigame gallo pinto. Y no se le olvide, don't forget to ask for the check, la cuenta, por favor. Next. Other delicious foods. Granizado, top left. This is what we call a snow cone on steroids. It is built from, shaped from a block of ice and added ice cream and milks of all sorts. It is an absolute deliciousness. We also have chorreadas, bottom right, which is a corn cake. And again, lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. Next, please. Last, Costa Rica will keep all of your senses alive, or as we say, pura vida, or pure life. Gracias. Next, please. We will now cross the Caribbean Sea due northeast to La Isla del Encanto, Puerto Rico, where Kathy and Doug will take us on a journey. Gracias.
Bienvenidos a Puerto Rico. Welcome to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an island located between the Atlantic and the Caribbean Sea. It is 100 miles east to west, 30 miles north south. The center part of the island is very mountainous, and the southwest corner of the island has recently been with earthquakes. Just north of the Atlantic Ocean is the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean. Isla Boriquen, the name of Puerto Rico when the Taino Indians lived there 2,000 years ago before the Spaniards came to America. The Boriquen means the great land of the valiant and noble lord. That is why the people that live in Puerto Rico call themselves as Boricuas or Borinqueños. You probably did not realize that you use some Taino words in your way of living. And these are words that are also same in Spanish and English, like barbecue, canoe, hurricane, hammock, and tobacco. These are common words that came from Taino origin from the Arawak dialect. Cristobal Colon arrived in Puerto Rico on November 19, 1493. Soon after that, he claimed the island for Spain and renamed it San Juan Bautista, but the name was changed then to Puerto Rico, which means rich port. For 400 years, Puerto Rico was under Spanish control. The Spanish, as they took control, converted all the Tainos as slaves and also forced them to convert to Christianity. Many illnesses of the Spaniards also began to affect the life of the Taino Indians, and many died. With the loss of the Tainos as slaves, the Spaniards were forced to then bring Africans over. The first African slave came over in 1509. In 1527, a major rebellion of the African slaves occurred, and many of them had to escape into the mountains and lived as Maroons with the surviving Tainos. Finally, in 1784, Spain suspended the idea of branding the slaves and also began to give them ways to obtain their freedom. In 1868, some changes began to occur when the Puerto Ricans began to attempt independence, and this occurred in the city of Lares. The Spanish did take control, but little by little, things did change, and Spain then began granting Puerto Rico more autonomy in how they govern themselves. The history of Puerto Rico then began to change in 1898 when the United States declared war against Spain in the Spanish-American War. On July 25th of 1898, United States troops invaded Puerto Rico and occupied the island. The occupation continued until the Treaty of Paris was signed on December 10th of 1898, and at that time, Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States. The changes within Puerto Rico began stronger in 1917 when the United States passed the Jones-Shafter Act, which provided United States citizenship to the people that lived in Puerto Rico. This also made them eligible for draft. The greatest change then started in 1950 when President Truman signed the Puerto Rico Commonwealth Bill, which allowed Puerto Rico then to work on developing their own constitution. This constitution then was approved by the citizens of Puerto Rico in 1951 in a referendum, and on July 25th, 1952, Luis Muñoz Marín, as the governor, proclaimed Puerto Rico as Estado Libre Asociado de Puerto Rico. From 1967 to 2020, there have been 6 different plebiscites to determine what the status of Puerto Rico may be in the future. This was to determine if they're going to be a United States state, an independent nation, or to continue as a free associated state. The last plebiscite in 2020, the majority of the voting people did vote to become a state, but the final decision is up to the United States Congress. What is the future of Puerto Rico? To become a state or not to a state? That is yet to be determined. As a tourist going to Puerto Rico, going to the Old San Juan is a very important thing to do. This is the place that the Spaniards built and designed when they came, and it is a walled city. At one end there's a fort, and in the center part is where the people lived. These are pictures of the Castillo de San Felipe del Morro, found on the tip of the Old San Juan. And you can notice there's 3 flags that fly over the fort, which is a national park, and that's the flag of the United States, the flag of Puerto Rico, and the flag of Spain at the time of the colonization. In Old San Juan, there are 3 places that you would probably understand to look. One is on the left, which is the Cathedral of San Juan. The one in the middle is La Fortaleza, which is the home that all governing leaders in Puerto Rico have had ever since the colonization days and until present, where the governor's residence is there. And on the right would be a common person and their home and how they would live in Old San Juan now. A view of the city walls in San Juan now shows you how it would look as coming in. The walkway at the bottom has been built recently, where now you can walk around the whole point of the fort area and be able to look up at the walls from below. Another place to visit is the Yucca National Forest or the Caribbean National Forest. This is an example of how Puerto Rico used to look before, but it's now only 29,000 acres of land, but it's also small in size, but one of the most biologically diverse national forests of the United States. This is something you probably would hear in Puerto Rico, but probably never see. It is called the Coqui. It is the size of your thumb, but it keeps you awake at night or it puts you to sleep at night. But it's beautiful to hear, especially after rainstorms. Many of the crops that used to be grown in Puerto Rico, like sugarcane and coffee, pineapples, plantains, bananas, and cacao, have been becoming less and less because of the population taking over the land. But you will still see the beautiful flamboyant around the place as you see the trees changing.
Food of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is known as La Isla del Encanto, the Island of Enchantment. This is the reason it is a very popular travel destination. The island is in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, well known for its flavor and many Puerto Rican savory dishes. There are 3 different cultures that combine these dishes: the Taino, the African, and the Spanish. The Tainos were the first people Christopher Columbus met when he arrived in 1493. There were no large animals at the time, so they only ate vegetables, small mammals, and became skilled fishermen. The Spanish brought with them wheat, onions, garlic, herbs, and an essential ingredient for Puerto Ricans, olive oil. The Africans brought coconut, rice, plantains, cassava, tamarind, and much, much more. They also introduced deep frying foods like cuchifritos and empanadillas. Arroz con gandules. Rice with pigeon peas. This dish is a part of our national dish. If there's a party in Puerto Rico, there will be arroz con gandules. It's one of the main dishes for any occasion. Pernil, slow roasted pork. This is the other part of our national dish. Pernil is usually a shoulder, butt, or leg that is enjoyed tremendously during the holidays, especially Christmas. Arroz blanco con habichuelas guisadas. White rice with stewed beans. This is a traditional rice and beans, a main staple for Puerto Rican cuisine you will love. Pollo guisado, chicken stew. Pollo guisado is a dish that is budget friendly. It contains the cheapest cuts of chicken, like legs and thighs. You'll get so much flavor with this dish. Sofrito. Sofrito is a flavored mixture of aromatic ingredients blended. Sofrito is the base of most Puerto Rican dishes. The mixture of the herbs, spices are also used in other Caribbean cultures for stews, soups, and rice and beans. Pastelón de plátanos, plantain pie. Pastelón de plátanos is a dish that is made with layers of thin sliced plantains, ground beef, and cheese. We call it Puerto Rican lasagna. Alcapurrias. Alcapurrias is a fritter with grated yuca mass, green bananas, and meat. This dish is a classic traditional fried snack and a favorite appetizer in the Caribbean. Chicharrones de pollo, Puerto Rican fried chicken. Chicharrones de pollo are crispy bone-in nuggets of fried chicken, seasoned with Latin spices like adobo and fried until it is super crunchy. Flan, baked custard with caramel. Flan is a traditional dessert in Puerto Rico. It is also known as an egg custard. It is rich, creamy, and delicious. Mofongo con camarones, fried mashed green plantains with shrimp. Another traditional dish from Puerto Rico that has fried green plantains mashed in a wooden pilon with garlic, and saute the shrimp and enjoy. Empanadillas, meat pies, also known as pastelillos or Puerto Rican beef turnovers. Similar to empanadas, these have a thinner, flakier crust. They are made by many different cultures and called many different names. Pasteles, seasoned taro root and plantain masa filled with pork and wrapped in a banana leaf. This traditional dish made mostly during the Christmas holidays. Pasteles are a type of tamal made with pork and adobo and stuffing. Rellenos de papas, stuffed fried potatoes. Rellenos de papas are mashed potato croquettes stuffed with ground beef hash. It is also a street food snack in Puerto Rico and is one of my favorites. Plátanos maduros, fried sweet plantains. These are sliced ripe plantains that become caramelized around the edges when fried. It's a tasty side dish. Sancocho, beef stew. This stew is made with corn on the cob, potatoes, and chayote squash. It is a perfect soup for a cold day. Coquito, Puerto Rican eggnog. Coquito comes from the word coconut. It means little coconut in Spanish. It's a traditional Christmas drink. Puerto Rican foods are traditional, unique, and represents cultural racial mix. It is a series of visual manifestation and interaction with the environment that make the region of people different from the rest of the world. Hundreds of customs and traditions are what defines Puerto Rico. They are family-oriented, people who use food to bring everyone together and love to celebrate any occasion. Huepa, which means exclaim excitement or that's awesome. And now we travel to Mexico for Carlos Olivares' presentation.
Buenos dias, Carlos Olivares, counselor at OCC. My portion of the program will cover the third Hispanic country that we're covering in this program. It also happens to be the country that is closest to the U.S., the Estados Unidos de Mexico, the United States of Mexico, the same as we have United States of America. What you see now will be the flag of Mexico, and all countries have flags that represent something about their country. The colors of the flag will be, as you see, green, white, and red. The green part of the flag symbolizes the hope for the future and the victories from the past. The white part symbolizes the Mexican ideal, what they're always striving to achieve. And the last color on the red represents the blood shed by the heroes of Mexico that led to the independence of Mexico from Spain. The pictorial in the center is an Aztec legend that the Aztec legend said back thousands of years ago that when they wanted to establish the center of the Aztec Empire, they were trying to find a way to locate as to where that location should be. And the legend says that wherever they would find an eagle with a serpent snake in its beak would be the location of where they should establish their center of the empire. It happened to be that that's where they found it which now happens to be the city of Mexico, which has over 9 million people living in that particular part of the city. The two parts of the program, of this portion of the program we'll cover, will be language and food. So the language of Mexico is primarily Spanish, but prior to the Aztecs arriving in the southeast coast of Mexico, the native languages, indigenous people, have lived in this region of the world for over 2,000 years, and have been speaking their native languages for that long, and even today. So what we have now would be the states of Mexico, Estados Unidos and Mexico, with the particular languages under each particular state. You will notice that the northern part, the top part, would have between 1 to 4 languages. Each language listed is actually in the native language of the native people, and just using Spanish to spell the word out along the way. But if we move slowly down toward the middle of the country, you'll begin to see that there are more native languages, indigenous people speaking that language that have been spoken for the last thousand years, and they continue to speak them today. And you can see by the state the number of different languages that each state has people today speaking that language along the way. So we slowly move down to the southern part. As you move down, we go down to the southern part, Jalisco, Michoacan, Guerrero, Puebla, and then look at Oaxaca. Oaxaca is at the very bottom. Look how many languages are located or actually spoken in the state of Oaxaca. Now, Oaxaca is spelled differently than it sounds. If you change an O to a W, it would be Wa, and then X to the H as before, it becomes Oaxaca. But look at the number of languages, native languages, 15. In 2003, the Mexican government, by law, declared all languages, 69 languages that include Spanish, as official languages of the Estados Unidos de Mexico. So not only are they recognized, but they're honored, and more importantly, they're still spoken by people who live in these areas of the country. So if you visit any of these states, you will notice, but listen carefully, there are different languages being spoken by different citizens of that state, depends upon their native language. And of course, Spanish permeates all the states of Mexico. That sort of brings the country together. This is an artistic rendition of the different foods of Mexico that you will see depending upon the region. But 3 basic foods of Mexico, no matter where you are in Mexico, are actually corn, which is converted to tortillas. Matter of fact, the government of Mexico, the federal government of Mexico, subsidizes the growing of corn and the products to provide basic food for all of the citizens, regardless of their income. The second basic food you'll find in Mexico would be beans, also referred to as frijoles. Usually you will find the pinto beans in the northern part of Mexico, and as you move south gradually, you begin to see more of the black bean. The third basic food would also be rice. All of these products are easily grown as crops, and therefore becomes more available, and a lot of people have their own gardens that actually grow their own vegetables and things like that to be able to provide the food, especially frijoles, beans. So people can actually have beans for 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast and dinner primarily are refried beans, and usually at noon for lunch, it's fresh beans along the way. So what we do then is look at the pictures. You also will see different products, crops like pumpkins, and you also will find chiles to spice up the food along the way. So as you move, depends upon where you eat. If you visit the country of Mexico, you will find more seafood based dishes on the outer portion, east and west, than you would in the center, which is primarily the main source of protein would be either beef, pork, or cabrito. So what we see now would be actual pictures of actual real food, Mexican food, comidas mexicanas. The common ones that you will notice will be nachos, which is we usually find everywhere. And then toward the bottom, going south, enchiladas. And you also will find below enchiladas, tacos. Now, tacos, enchiladas are always made differently, depends upon the region. Basically, there are corn basic food tortillas, corn tortillas that are put together depends upon the ingredients of the particular region of this country. But you will also see other types of food that we are not recognized very easily in the Mexican restaurants that we eat at, or Taco Bell or Chipotle. But if you notice, you look around, look at the north west side, the very top on the left-hand side, Caesar salad. How many of you realize that Caesar salad is actually was created in Mexico? The story goes in 1924, an Italian who actually ran a restaurant in Tijuana, in Mexico, ran out of ingredients to create a salad or make a salad for one of his customers. So he actually made a salad, created a salad based on what he had left salad-wise, and also created a new dressing that we refer to now. And Caesar salad actually is named after himself. Caesar Cardini was his name. Cesar Cardini, and that is recognized now as Caesar salad. All restaurants, many restaurants besides Mexican restaurants, will in fact serve that, but now we know that it was invented, created in Mexico. Now, to make you a little bit hungrier, we have now some actual pictures of different foods that are typical, comida típicas de Mexico. By looking at the different pictures, you also see the foods and how they're mixed and how they're cooked and how you can order them in any of the basic Mexican restaurants. But if you look at them very carefully, of course, everything is in Spanish, Mexico, but you will see the different types of protein and different types of vegetables that are mixed with the basic protein meats along the way. And a lot of these you will recognize, and you can probably order it in most restaurants. Taco Bell, which is my favorite, but made differently so that every restaurant you order food from or you eat at will be tasting different because of the ingredients and because of the spices that are different from each other. Now, the last slide we're going to be covering here, as you can see, hopefully your mouth is watering by now. Typical Mexican dishes you'll find in Oakland County Mexican restaurants, anywhere in the county. And the three basic foods, as we talked about before, the corn, which is represented by the corn chips in the red basket at the top. The beans, in this case, refried beans. Refried beans means more like mashed potatoes with special spices that go with it along the way. And below the beans will be the rice. And again, it depends upon the restaurant, depends upon the region, as how they're going to spice it up along the way. To the very right of the red plate is a green glob of food. We know that as guacamole. Now, guacamole is spelled with a G-U, but actually we would, in Spanish, we call that guacamole, W-A-mole. So when next time you order guacamole, you say guacamole in the Mexican restaurant. Also, when you look a little bit to the right and between the chips and the red plate, there's a little dish of salsa. We call it salsa, hot sauce. Salsas can be made from different chiles, and therefore the hotness of the salsa would depend upon the chiles that are used. So you can order mild, medium, or you can hot. In some places, you can even order super hot salsas along the way. Now, on the left-hand side, in the black dish, which we refer to as a comal, it's metal to keep the food hot. You will find it looks like it's a fajita. It looks like it's beef and chicken, of course, with the green peppers and the onions spiced up, so that all you will need to eat that will be the tortillas that are part of the dish, that you wrap it up and you go ahead and eat that along the way. You will also see one more thing, the glass of water. Glass of water, normally we tend to use no matter how hot or how mild the salsa is, to help in the digestion and also help with the taste. Adults, of course, will have water, but most adults will order some kind of cold beverage, alcoholic beverage to go with it along the way. So now we have all these dishes. You can order these in any family-owned Mexican restaurant, and the food served in each family-owned Mexican restaurant will depend upon the region in which they, the owners, or their ancestors came from. So every restaurant you visit will be different from each other. Depends upon the spices they use and how they combine their foods along the way. So this will be the last part of this program. So to conclude the 2021 Hispanic Heritage Month celebration, I will now turn you over to two people, Christina Marshall and Alicia Paramo Dion, to say a few words. So, and muchas gracias for having spent the time.
Hola, my name is Christina Marshall, and at this time, I would like to welcome back our panelists for a Q&A session. So if all of our panelists would come on back. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom so we can make sure that we're able to answer all of your questions. I do see that there are a couple of questions in the chat, so I am also going to make sure that we answer those as well. So our first question is, what is the most respectful way to address the combined ethnic language group, the combined ethnic/language group? Any of our panelists?
Well, it really would depend upon the area you're in. Everyone does it differently, but just to address someone of Hispanic heritage, most of the time we don't really need to be recognized as being Hispanic. But if you understand a little bit of the Spanish and the culture, and you can speak a little bit of Spanish, it's always helpful for the person to use a little bit of Spanish to indicate that they really have learned a little bit along the way. But basically, it's generalized, depends upon where you're at.
So if a person was not sure whether one was Hispanic or Latino or Latina, how would they address an individual?
I would ask the person that you're speaking to what they're comfortable with and being addressed. That's always the best thing, I would think.
Fantastic. We have lots of comments that with people thanking you. One of the other questions that we did have is, why was participating in this event important to each of you?
I would say it's been many, many years since we had an event similar to this here at OCC. So when we got together, and thanks to you, Christina, again, we felt that it was important to bring it back and to share with our colleagues, students, and anyone else how important it is for us to be recognized.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add that I think it was, for me, it was important to show the diversity. I think many of us know Mexico quite well. And I thought it was important to bring in many of us here from the college with different ethnic backgrounds, Costa Rican, Mexican, Spanish, Puerto Ricanos. And so if you could see the richness of what it means to be Latino or Hispanic, whatever term is preferred, that was really important to me, to show the diversity within this diverse group.
Okay, there's another question. Do you think that the high literacy rate in Costa Rica has a lot to do with the number of different languages the students are taught?
It could be, but education has been extremely important in my country for many, many years. The national budget, the fact that student teachers are sent out to rural areas to teach. It is extremely important, we feel, for everyone to learn to read and write. So that's one of the reasons why it is so high. Thank you.
Christina, do we have any other questions?
No, we don't.
All right. Well, it is important that we strive to understand one another. Today's panel serves as a valuable reminder that although we come from different backgrounds, countries, or territories, we may look different or speak different languages, we all share the desire to belong and to be respected. So at this time, I'm going to have Alicia end our presentation.
Gracias. Thank you, Christina. And thank you to our panel. So there are many different ways to say goodbye in Spanish. And you can see right here, here are a few of them. Adios means goodbye. Hasta luego, see you later. Hasta la vista, see ya. That one would be probably common for those of you who know Arnold Schwarzenegger, hasta la vista. Hasta pronto, see you soon. And as they say commonly in Argentina and Chile, ciao, or goodbye. But before we say goodbye, finally, I want to recognize and mention our extreme appreciation to OCC for recognizing the achievements and the contributions of the Hispanic Latino employees and students. The 8 of us on this committee have worked very hard, and collectively we represent 229 years at OCC, inspiring students and each other to achieve success. So as a final note, all attendees, you will receive a link to today's presentation that has been recorded, so you can go back and review it if you'd like. I know there was a lot of information. I myself have heard it before, and I still learned something. Feel free to stick around and read the full bios of the hardworking members of the 2021 Hispanic Heritage Month Committee. Have a great day, and thank you very much for joining us. Adios.